Educating, informing, serving. Fact TV, keeping government honest.
I'm going to call this meeting of the Wyndham Northeast Supervisory Union Board to order. It is January 27, and we are meeting via Zoom. Chris, adjustments to the agenda.
Yes, I do have a few that we spoke about earlier. The first one, I would like to move the auditor's presentation to 2A.
Okay, and I see we have Cindy here, so that's great. Others, Chris?
The next one, I would like to swap updated on superintendent's evaluation process, move that to 8C, and then move SU building lease to 8B.
Okay. Cindy and Miranda, are you ready to speak to the SU audit? If you are, you're on. We will be following your discussion with communication and public comment for members who may be wondering if we're actually skipping over it. We're not. But we don't want to hear from the auditors first so they can go on about their business. Also, because the meter may be running. So anytime you're ready, we're ready.
Good. Ron is trying to join us.
Yeah, he just joined us, so he should be
Ron
on now.
just joined us. So Ron, they moved us up to right now. I think he's still on mute. Okay, yes. So, FY20, I'm coming to you 6 months earlier than I did for FY19. So obviously that is great progress to be made for what's going on, and especially with everything that happened with FY20. We were there, we were working, and then COVID hit in March and we still hadn't closed FY19. We worked through that, and then we worked through FY20. Flora came on board. I've been working diligently with her, getting the numbers, getting everything for FY20. I wasn't sure if y'all, if they shared the draft with y'all to look at the numbers. So I usually go to, where am I? Schedule E, excuse me, Statement E, for revenues and expenditures. General fund just shows you had about 10 million in revenue, 10 million in expenditures. Last year, you started the year with FY20 about 5,000 in the hole, and you ended the year about 17,000 to the good. So, you know, and in a year where, you know, 3 months of that was COVID, that is awesome. Especially, and with the change in employees that you had, that is also outstanding with that. So, and just so you are aware, not only did the SU end with a positive balance, the high school ended with a positive balance, putting money into fund balance. Rockingham and Union all ended with putting money into fund balance. So, which with everything that's happened, that is awesome.
Miranda, why don't you give them an idea how much they put into fund balance too? You got those numbers in front of you?
I do. For the high school, you put about $200,000 into fund balance. For Rockingham, you put about $500,000 into fund balance. And for the Union Elementary, you put $850,000 into fund balance. I know there's some mitigating factors going into those numbers. Negotiations haven't been settled. So there's some things that probably will affect those fund balance numbers. But the fact that that's where you landed with what's gone on is awesome. And you know, yeah, it's awesome. There's still struggles. I know eFinance is the software that the business office is working under is still a struggle. We're working the best we can. It's to the point where the legislature, there's even proposed legislature to propose a halt on implementing e-finance statewide and to do a review of the actual software. So knowing that and knowing that this district was one of the very first implementers on this software, they've come a long ways since going live January of 2019, but it's not where it needs to be, and that's mostly e-finance as well. So I wanted to keep it short, sweet, and just give you the positive news. It's been nice working with Flora, coming in with a positive attitude and really working with me and trying to get the numbers as clean as possible for FY20 and working with us to get FY21 going strong so that 21 can be even better as we're working through this year. With that, Ron, did you have anything you wanted to say?
No, I'd say that there's been a lot of progress. Obviously, early on in the audit, you know, there were kind of the hiccups from the year before, the lingering effects. You know, I'd probably call it a hangover, you know, until, you know, Miranda and her group were able to, you know, basically get the books and work with you all to get those fixed. You know, there was basically we had to go back and correct some of the stuff that was like picked and choose on what to post. But once those details got worked out, you know, as Miranda said, that progress and the great progress, you know, and the fact that we're 6 months earlier having this conversation and delivered the audits and 21's actually underway, you know, to get the books, you know, cleaned up and working with Flora and really kind of mitigating, you know, all the other the concerns of e-finance. I would say that, you know, that's a job well done by you all down there.
Well, thank you, Ron. Cindy was here before. Are you here still, Cindy? And if so, do you have any comment?
It wasn't Cindy. I had to log on, so it was mine, but I renamed it. Sorry about that.
Okay.
She's probably taking a vacation right now. So.
All right. Ron, I'm going to, in just a moment, ask this board if they have any questions. I think there is a likelihood that after we've had a chance to digest the audit a little bit further, that we might have additional questions that we would like.
We're more than happy to come back on anytime. More than happy. Anytime you guys need us. Okay.
Well, that's greatly appreciated. Are there, and I want to say, bearing in mind that we have not done communication and public comment yet, we will be holding that immediately after we get done with the audit report. Bearing that in mind, are there any questions from the board? Cheryl, Charles.
Thanks. Well, thank you for everybody for getting this moved ahead so that we're really looking at it in a timely way. We don't have to belabor it right now, but I did send a request to Flora, having read the documents today. I was looking to see if we might see 3 letters that were cited in the audit report, one of December 21 and 2 of December 31. And one of those from December 31 has to do with internal controls. And rather than going through the details of what might have been in those management letters with requests to staff to, be alert to things, make improvements in some areas. The one question I would ask is, do you have any concerns whatsoever about internal controls with respect to the management of the finances?
The big thing that I would say, is the issue still with e-finance and the struggles, that it really creates inside for best practices. That's the big thing. I would argue, the letters that we gave you, this year that we still have not actually gone over with Chris and Flora, in complete detail. I know they've been focusing on the drafts, really kind of, preparing for all these meetings coming up. But sitting here and just answering that question, simply said, e-finance is your biggest struggle and really truly poses the biggest, internal control and best practice struggles that you guys have down there. And we don't see that going away anytime soon until they can really stay out in front of this thing. I mean, bank reconciliations, is still an issue with that software. Just printing off reports and trying to get the same answer from that software is problematic. Those truly are the best, the best examples that I can give you on the struggles down there. And that's really where I think that a lot of that's beyond your control, which is why the bill that got introduced last week and, in the legislature, I think is causing a timeout, so that e-finance can better handle the clients that they have right now and really not bring any more clients into it and tie up their resources, which really they don't have now in the attention to pay, these problems. So, but that's the biggest, clearly the biggest, thing that I would say right there for best practices and internal controls is the challenges, continued challenges that software brings to you.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank
Anyone
you.
else from the board? Priscilla?
I was surprised when I went through it, and when I got to the food service, it's showing a deficit of $267,404. And I thought when we talked about the food service, we were saying that everything was paying for itself. And in fact, they were even maybe making money. So that, I'm not sure where that's coming from. Is there any explanation for that, or?
Miranda, do you have that in front? I just don't have the draft right here in front of me.
I do, and I think what that is, let me get down there just to make sure. I think if you look next to it, there's, so there's summer food service. I think there's 3 food service accounts now. I guess it would depend on what draft you're looking at. The final draft I show, food service has a positive fund balance of $96,000. Summer food service has a positive fund balance of $54,000. And then food service for COVID directly has a positive fund balance of $64,000. So,
and is it fair to say, Miranda, that she might have a draft where all the reallocations and repurposing of the CRF funds, didn't happen?
Correct. I think we issued one. The first draft didn't have the reallocation between food service and summer food service and COVID. It was all there. It just needed to be reallocated between the funds.
And in fairness to the district, you all, those reallocations, literally, it was right before Christmas when all that information really started coming into all the school systems in the state of Vermont, FYI. And it was after Christmas before you started seeing relief money coming your way.
Thank you, Ron. What else? Priscilla, go ahead, please.
So David, are you saying, are they telling us that there is a draft beyond it that we didn't get? Must be, because that's the draft that was just sent out that I got, that I went through yesterday.
What I heard Miranda say, and Miranda, you're going to have to correct me on this, but I believe Miranda said that right now there's a positive $97,000 fund balance in food service. Is that roughly correct?
Yes.
114,000 if I add up what she told us, but
yeah.
We haven't gotten that draft. Is that what we're being told?
I don't know what you have in front of you, Priscilla, but if you want to just send it back to Flora, let us just take a look at it. We'll make sure, before the next conversation, that you have the most latest and greatest version. I don't know what you have, Priscilla, but send us that back and we'll certainly put you the latest and greatest draft in hands.
Okay, I'm thinking that the whole board probably has the same draft. That's why I'm asking David, and if we need that maybe to get out to all of us so that we can see all that because that's great news.
Sure. Yeah.
Flora,
Priscilla?
the chair is going to recognize Flora Pagan because I believe you probably have some relevant information for us, Flora, and then I'll go to Jack.
Yes, Ron, I only have the draft that I sent the board. I don't have anything different, so maybe that's the issue. I just have one draft. That's the only one that I have that I sent the board.
Okay, we'll make sure, we'll follow up with you, Flora.
Okay, thank you.
Stand by.
But just before everybody hangs on the phone, Priscilla asked a good question. That food, I don't want anybody going out there to say we got food service problems. You don't. You know, a lot of that information was done in December, literally as it became available to all the districts. So Priscilla, the food services Miranda said are now in positive situations as we reallocated, you know, based on the COVID relief and, you know, the information that we had available back in December that finally came through.
Thank you, Ron. Jack Breyer? Did you wish to be recognized, Jack?
I'm fine. I just wanted to say that I think that it looked to me like there was still that this was still very much an interim report, and just to not draw a ton of conclusions because there are so many reallocations being made here that I think if you have anything other than today's report, it's probably wrong, and if you have today's report, it's probably premature. But beyond that, it's fine.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Miranda. I believe we're all set now on audit. Okay, thanks. We'll look forward to seeing you again in the future.
All right.
Everybody be well. Everybody be safe.
Thank you.
All right, communication and public comment. Chris, do we have communication public comment tonight? I see we have more than a few people who represent the public here.
I do not have anything in the chat at this time, David, and I'm going to be shutting it off shortly as requested by the board as soon as public comment is over. So,
Okay, well, thank you, members of the public, for showing up tonight. Makes us feel like we're doing important work. All right, there will be no review of the minutes because the minutes are not ready. Once again, if you're looking for responsibility, blame your chair. We anticipate that we will have those minutes as well as the minutes for this meeting at our next SU meeting. And I do not believe there's a policy update tonight either, is there, Chris?
no, there is not.
Okay, so reports, superintendent. What would you like to tell us, Chris?
Thank you. This is a little lengthy. It's been a while since I've been able to give a report, so just bear with me for a little bit. I'm going to start off with the school nutrition program. Since the announcement of the universal free meals through the federal summer food service program in early September, WNESU school nutrition program has seen a steady increase in student meal participation. Student meal totals for breakfast and lunch so far this year were 11,774 in September, 8,090 in October, 22,948 in November, and 25,407 in December. Total meal counts for November and December were greatly enhanced by the success of our holiday meal box program, where families could pick up a free box with food equivalent to 1 week worth of meals for children 18 and under, ensuring that they had meals over the holiday breaks. Over 500 children received boxes each of the 4 times we offered them. This program also helps support many of our local food growers and producers. This is all made financially possible by federal waivers and reimbursements, but we could not have done it without the truly tireless efforts of our program staff, as well as the support from schools, admin, and staff who let us turn the cafeteria into a box building workshop. Our program continues to adapt and thrive with the help and support of the community, allowing us to provide every student with access to great nutritious meals. Next up, COVID testing for teachers and employees. Teachers and employees are given the opportunity to have COVID-19 tests conducted, as you all know. The latest test that we had was conducted on January 19th, and I believe this is the 3rd round of that testing that's volunteered for any teachers or employees of a school that want to get them. Moving right along to the federal COVID-19 relief fund update. On January 5th, the U.S. Department of Education announced that Vermont would receive another $126 million in the ESSER 2 funds as part of the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act. Allocations to individual LEAs will follow the same methodology as the ESSER 1 money funds were that were part of the March 2020 CARES Act. In addition, on January 11th, 2021, the U.S. Department of Education announced that Vermont would also receive another $1.9 million in what is being termed GEAR 2 funding. The GEAR 2 funding largely follows the same guidelines as the first GEAR funds, and the uses of these funds will be determined by the governor's office. Okay, now I want to get into last year versus this year's in regards to student counts. So in 2019-20, if we included pre-K, we had 1,165 students WNESU wide. If we excluded the pre-K, we had 1,049. And that's as of the fall. And so this fall, 20 to 2021, if we include pre-K, we had 1,051. And then if we exclude pre-K, we have 83 less. 966. So what that means is if from last year to this year, if we include pre-K, we have a total of 114 students less. If we exclude pre-K, we only have 83 students less than we had in our overall student enrollment in WNESU. So there's a slight decline in the overall ADM reports. And keep in mind, these could change throughout the school year. These are reports that we send out the student numbers to the state in the fall. And so they're a moving target, but based on last fall to this fall, this is currently what we have. Moving on to student services. While we anticipate an increase in the number of referrals to student services, ESTs, 504s, and special ed due to the COVID, current numbers are trending opposite. At this early point, we do not know exactly why, but we will continue to monitor them as the year progresses. One of the hypotheses is due to the pod sizes and the ability for teachers to spend more one-on-one time with students. They are able to address learning needs in a more individualized way. So in January of 2020, we had 309 students on IEPs. In January of 2021, we had 251. And that is down 58 IEPs from last January. Referrals for special ed in January of 2020, we had 24. As of January of 2021, we had 14, so that's down by 10 referrals. Human resources, wanted to announce that the new human resources page that you can reach from the WNESU website. If you go to staff and you go to resources, you can get onto the brand new HR site there. There you can access benefits, enrollment forms, get copies of CBAs, find compliance forms, some of those compliance forms such as FMLA forms and data sheets. In addition to that, W-2s were mailed out again this year due to the COVID measures. Next year, W-2s will be accessible through the Employee Access Center, and 1095-Cs will be available by the end of January and will also be mailed out this year. Open enrollment, with the help of Frank Vitti, who's in our business office. He's the accounting clerk. Human Resources have been able to finish auditing all the insurance accounts along with processing all the paperwork associated with open enrollment. This was a huge undertaking with the change from fiscal to annual enrollment, but well worth it. Through the endeavors, we have realized that there is much more cost-efficient ways to handle the process and are proud to announce a new process that will happen in 2021 starting in February. All new hires will go through the benefits process starting at the end of February with the new online Bernie Benefits enrollment portal. And once the portal is up and running, we'll send everyone an email invitation to access the portal. The portal will be key for employees to be able to access their benefits information 24/7, which they, as you all know, you don't have that now. So that's a huge shift in how we're trying to be more efficient and communicate with employees. Employees will be able to see what plans they are signed up for, member service contact information. We found through open enrollment, our employees are not as informed as they should be. Therefore, You'll also find a short educational video and informative briefs on different benefits and topics for employees. So the HR office is also very busy with trying to improve what we're doing. The business office. Business office is working with the auditors, as you know, on draft reviews for the audit for FY20, corrections, documents, and submissions. They also have been working on final budget reviews, year-end state document submissions, and financial reports for the schools, 1099s for vendors, grant document reviews and reportings, bank reconciliations, and tax table updates that rate and rate changes for the new year. As all of you, if not most of you know, all budgets have been approved by your boards, and the articles are also in the process of being created and approved for each board. In addition to that, I believe it's H48 that came out recently. Most, if not all, voting for school budgets and articles will be done Australian ballot on town meeting day this year due to the COVID outbreak. Governor signed H48. That is a bill that authorizes emergency procedures for 2021 annual municipal meetings in response to the COVID-19. The three primary operative provisions for this bill are it gave municipal legislative bodies may vote to move the date of the municipalities to 2021 annual meeting to a date no later in the year than meeting to a date later in the year of 2021. They weren't really specific on what that is. Also, a municipal legislative body may also require the municipal clerk to mail all of the active registered voters in the municipality the Australian ballot to be used in the 2021 annual municipal meetings. And the third part of this was the Secretary of State is authorized to order or permit as applicable appropriate election procedures that supplement and relate to any municipal authority exercised under the provision of the subsections in order to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the voters, election workers, and candidates in carrying out those meetings. Curriculum grants and professional development. We've been collecting measured academic progress maps, data, and comparing the fall 2020 scores with the winter 2020 scores on the same cohort of students. This data will show us how much, if any, learning losses occurred for each specific cohort as they moved ahead to the following grade this fall. For example, the scores will show where a group of fourth grade students were in January of 2020 before COVID school closures and remote learning compared to those scores for the same group in the fifth grade in the fall of 2020. We'll share this information when we complete the winter map testing during the month of January. So we will have the latest data for each cohort. The complete report will have the scores for students from the fall 2019, winter of 20, and fall of 20, and winter of 2021. While the teachers and principals have been drilling down on each of their student-specific data, how they are learning this year in their classes, and what the strategies we can employ to alleviate any gaps. The data in the report we'll share with the boards will also show the overall trends of our district students. We're also excited to have entered into a contract with the Vermont All Learners Network for professional development in math for our K-8 teachers. The focus of this training, which will be as district seminar and coaching at each individual school, will be on a structure of the math menu components of effective math lessons. This includes classroom observations and provide feedback to co-teaching opportunities, conferencing with individual teachers, and the continued school-wide support, problem-solve challenges to menu implementation, analyze math materials for supporting students, and allow for collaborative planning among teachers. This project will be a 3-year commitment between All Learners Network and WNESU. And just some quick attendance, learning, and highlights from each school. For Athens and Grafton, they currently have 49 students. They welcome back 1 and lost a kindergarten student, keeping the enrollment at 42, with 7 VTVL students for a total of 49 enrolled Athens Grafton. Bellows Falls Union High School, attendance continues to be strong for in-person learning and reasonably strong for remote learning, as has been in the case since we began remote instruction back in March. A small fraction of the student population struggles to attend remotely, but has much better attendance in person. Because of our remote classes are essential, the continuation of in-person classes, it is important for students to attend their classes, whether they are a particular day of a student in person or remote, such as cohort A, cohort B. And the high school, they have a committee of counselors and administrators that meet weekly to address the individual needs of any student who have attendance issues. Saxton's River currently has 76 students, 68 in person and 8 in VTVLC. During their remote week, the most recent remote week we had, they averaged 98% attendance. Central School currently has 125 in-person students and 23 in VTVLC. During the most recent remote learning, they had an average of 88.78 attendance, and with a yearly average attendance of 90.61. Pre-K, the Early Education Center enrollment is 28 students, which is 13 fewer students than last year. This is due to both lower capacities in our rooms with the safe and healthy school guidance, as well as fewer parents wanting their children in groups settings during this global pandemic. Preschool is in session in person 5 days a week, Monday, Tuesday for 3-year-olds, Wednesday, Thursday for 4-year-olds. The average daily attendance in person for pre-K through the school year so far up until December was 95%, and the average daily attendance during remote week in January was 55%. The middle school has a total of 183 students enrolled in person and 45 students enrolled in VTVLC. The average daily attendance in person for through the month of December was 86%. The average attendance of the remote week was 88%. And to wrap it up, Westminster currently has 136 students enrolled in in-person instruction and 17 students enrolled in VTVLC. And that is my lengthy report for this month.
Thank you, Chris. Chris, did you have enrollment numbers for the high school? I did not hear those.
I didn't. Let me just call this back up. I can call it off the numbers that we sent off to the state, and that would be for the high school. Currently, you have Bellows Falls Union High School. It looks like it's around 966 students.
Let's try that number again, please.
966 students.
I believe you have 966 in the WNESU.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. That would be quite big. Yes, so let's try this again. 308 students.
And do you have the breakout on VTVLC, Chris?
I do not.
Okay, fine. All right, thank you. That was a lot of information. And I'll bet I'm not the only one here who's still trying to digest it. Down to the business manager report. And I just want to point out that Flora and her team got quite the accolades from Ron Smith. So sounds like they approve of what you're doing, Flora. Do you have a finance or budget report you'd like to tell us about?
No more budgets. No, we don't have a budget report at the moment. We were just meeting with Ron so we could just finalize everything. We still have the elementaries and Rockingham in the high school draft that we're still waiting on and working with that. They sent us notes and it's been always like constant back and forth. So I guess that's the issue as well, that we didn't get like a final draft for the SU. But we're working with them one-on-one. They provide everything they needed. It was a little challenge trying to follow up upon other people's work that they're not in the office anymore, but we came up strong. I have a great team. I'm proud of all of them. My newbies are like super duper fast learners, really good on point. And we are more than a team. We're like family, you know, we all get along as a different environment. Anybody that has passed by our office could see the change in the office and the staff and the environment. You know, we are all content to be there and trying our best to bring everything together, and hopefully we'll have a better year, and hopefully FY22 we are all more engaged and have more knowledge as well, because it's a lot of parts of us learning, but no complaints.
Well, on behalf of this board, Flora, I would like to say, keep up the good work. And are there any questions for Flora before we move on? I think people are pretty pleased, Flora. Good sign. All right, we're down to item 7. Actually, we're already down past item 7 because we took care of that at the beginning of the meeting as a renumbered item 2A, which was the audit report from RHR Smith. 8, old unfinished business for discussion and action. Act 173 coalition update. Chris and I have discussed this. Andy and Chris have discussed this, and I think we decided to put the B on Andy tonight. So if you're ready, Andy, we would like to be educated.
I don't know if I can educate you, David, but I will do my best. And again, I think, David, if you can be my moderator, because I'll tend to use acronyms, and just catch me, and I'll try and do my best as we go along. What I know Chris had sent some information to the board just on the history of Act 173 and whatnot. So I wasn't going to jump into all that, and I mean I can try and touch on some questions if people have them. But you know, Act 173. The way I look at it is kind of a two-pronged approach. One, the idea is to improve student learning and outcomes, and but Vermont has always had this obsession with special ed students and getting special ed and having kids identified. And one of the big pieces was the reimbursement piece, and so districts were reimbursed up to 60% for their total special ed costs. So therefore, there was almost this, you know, incentive to have kids be identified because you got this reimbursement. And so that was part of the nexus of the report and moving in a direction to find a new funding mechanism. And the idea was to get districts to try and approach kids with learning disabilities and address those issues prior to them being referred to special education. So that's really the driver behind it. The teeth piece of it was to go after the special ed funding and to reduce that special ed funding. And so it's been delayed a couple of times. There's still some discussion if it's going to be delayed again. But you know, the last time I spoke with the state about it, which was a few weeks ago, they said that they're just going to start getting around to addressing it in February. So they haven't been really focused on it that I could tell. They did send out what was called a simulator for us to go in and kind of manipulate and look at different outcomes of where things would be based on a weighted, it's called a weighted study. And the idea there was to look at the different weights that would be assigned to different populations of students. And that being like high school students would possibly be weighted at a higher weight, and students of poverty would be weighted differently. And so that fluctuation would have an impact on what districts would receive in this special education block grant, because it's all based on, the block grant is all based on our long-term ADM, or average daily membership. And so they're going to look at 3 years, and they'll take those 3 years and then eventually move to a state long-term membership. And then that's what it will be funded on. Now, what is unclear, and I even queried the state this week to try and get an answer, and I haven't gotten a response back. And I don't think anyone really has a good grasp is how they're looking at the weighted study and what they're looking at doing with the different, like what option they might land on. And so, but one of the things I tried to do was look at the 4 options that they've been kind of talking about and really kind of parse out what it potentially could look like for us if Act 173 were to go into effect based on those different options.
Andy, would you like me to share that?
Yeah,
Google Doc that you did?
Yeah, thank you, Chris. So I'm just gonna wait for him to pull that up as that comes up. So right here, what you have in obviously in the first column are the different districts But the second column is looking at this year. And so the 3.5 million in yellow, that's what we anticipate, FY22, pardon me. So this is based on the budget that was just approved. So that is what we anticipate we're going to get in a reimbursement grant from the state, and we use that to reduce down the 6.6 million, which was the overall student services budget, which then got us down to I'm trying to see, it's a different color, the 3 million and change, which is our budget that was approved. So just to give you a reference, that's FY22. And then what I did was looked at these 4 different options, and then utilizing FY22 budget just as a benchmark to give you an idea. What you're looking at on the 3 different options, it's roughly it's looking like 900,000 to just over $1 million in less revenue that WNESU would bring in or get in the block census grant. And the only way to figure that out was because of the way the state does it, is they block it out by the different districts, which is what the numbers you see up top there. And the variations that you see, the slight variations, and I'll use like the high school because I think it's a real clear one there. So the difference is, like in option A, a high school student is weighted at 1.13, and like in option D or C, it's weighted at 1.44. So you see they have variations, but because of what happens, like in option C, a student of poverty gets rated at 0.81 as opposed to option A, where they're rated at 3.14. Those numbers actually equal each other in the end when everything flushes out, but that's how they would weight it. So again, what's unclear, and I wish I had an answer, and I really tried to get an answer for you guys, is how are they going to decide? Are they doing option A, B, C, or D? And that's what's unclear. But the numbers here, the 900, just over 900,000 to just over $1 million, is consistent with the report that came out, the district management group report, and a study from UVM back in 2016, 17. Does that sound about right, David? Or was it 2018?
Well, there was
remember
a
exactly when that.
pupil weighting factor report that was released on December 24th of 19. And that's gone out to board members a couple of times with the advice to don't bother reading the whole thing, just read the 6-page executive summary, which is a couple of pages in after we find out who the report was produced for. And then, of course, there was the, I think you referred to it as, was it factors report, Andy?
Well, there was the 2 reports I referred to as the UVM study and the DMG report.
DMG, okay. Because I believe that the DMG study came first, and bluntly, that was not at all favorable to the high poverty districts, such as ours. And the issue that we're running into here is that the way the formula in 173 works is essentially high poverty districts will be penalized for being high poverty districts. And the pupil weighting factor report of December 24, 19 pretty clearly indicated, at least the way I read it, is that actually there's a very direct line between kids who are eligible for free or reduced cost lunches and their ability to learn. And those are the kids that really should have a much higher weighting. It's not the way Act 173, as I read it, operates currently. And that's why we're looking at taking such a phenomenal hit to the taxpayers because of it, because of the 173 without mitigation is going to cost us $1 million a year for
not to interrupt, but the UVM study without any weighting system was coming out at almost $2 million. So the weight does help us, but it's still, because we have a high ratio of students with disabilities in our district, and we tend to trend higher than the nation, and also in the state, we tend to trend higher with students with emotional disturbances, and also with it's a catch-all. It's younger kids, but with developmental delay, and we're quite high in that area. And a student with developmental delay will stay in that category up until usually like around 6 to 8 years old. It really varies on when they went on an IEP. And then those kids tend to kind of flush out into speech and language disorders, autism, or emotional disturbance, which is why we have those higher rates. Some of those kids tend to have a much higher also need. And so therefore, that's where our costs go up because of those higher needs. And so one of the things we've been really working on the last 2.5 years is really trying to build up the what they call the MTSS system, or multiple tiers
support system.
Yeah, thank you.
Right?
Multi-tiered support systems, correct. And really that is a regular education function. And it's not a special education function. And some of the things that Chris was just talking about earlier in his report with the MAPS testing, and
give us
how that
definition on MAPS testing, if you can, Andy.
Yeah, sure. MAPS is it's from the Northwestern Educational Assessment Group out of Oregon, and
Measured
MAPS,
academic progress.
Thank you. Measured academic progress. I apologize. But what that does, and one of the reasons we went to it, is it gives us these 3 distinct benchmark times during a year where we can look at a kid, and then teachers can use that data to inform their instruction. And so it's a real powerful tool for that. The other part is what Dr. Carey has been implementing with the reading program, with the Fontes and Pinnell, and also then the professional development that's coming in with the mathematics, to allow the teachers to improve their instructional strategies, but also to identify where kids' needs are and start addressing them in the classroom prior to going to interventions. And so a lot of times in the multi-tiered systems, we talk about tiers, and you're a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 type of thing. But it's really, tier 1 is universal. It's what every single kid gets, right? And when they walk in the classroom. So the instruction from the teacher, everything is that universal in instructional practice. Tier 2, a lot of times, is actually in the classroom. It's that teacher doing that double dip on a student because they've used that data to look at a student and say, oh, I got to pull these 3 kids aside, and we're going to work a little harder with these 3 kids on this specific skill that they need. Tier 3 becomes that title intervention, and that intervention with a more of a specialist. And then we talk about tier 4, really is that special education, and where a student really needs real specific instruction in a specific skill area. And what's happened over time, and I saw it when I previously worked in Vermont, and I've seen it in other states, is we tend to think special education is a silver bullet and is going to fix every kid. So if they don't fit into that tier 1 universal design, we're going to push them over here to special education. Special education can fix them. And that's really the teeth behind, or the point behind Act 173, is to get us to change that, to reduce that piece. And so that's where we get stuck in this, like, it's a lengthy way of getting into, we have these high number of kids in special education. And as we're seeing, our numbers are starting to come down a little bit. And we think that's because the interventions are starting to work. I mean, that's the other hypothesis. We're involved now with educational support teams and helping to coordinate them so that they're applied equally across the whole SU. We're involved in coordinating 504 so that we're again, our accommodations for students and the systems are universal across the SU. So a lot of that piece is what needs to kind of adjust, that we can work to keep bringing down our special ed costs and to try and, reduce that $1 million gap.
So Andy, can you talk a little bit in regards to, so with this Act 173, not having this anywhere from a little bit over 900,000 for some districts, over $1 million for some, how is that going to impact the way we deliver instruction for these students? It's going to have to be picked up in the local budget is one.
Correct. So, the needs when a student has been identified as a student with a disability and an IEP, the team has decided what specialized instruction that student needs, and then we have to provide that specialized instruction. And so the cost is whatever that student needs. And so if the team, believes, and a lot of times it does happen, that this student needs, a one-on-one para for their entire day. And we do have students who have that need, but they also need, a high level of related services, and those being like speech therapy or occupational therapy, physical therapy, counseling, mental health counseling. All of those pieces are the services that we're providing to kids. And so it becomes this consistent, level of cost based on the number of kids we have. And so that difference would have to be picked up at the local end.
Andy, I want to stop you just for a moment because you have done an excellent job of explaining how we provide services here. And I think that's something we really need to keep our eye on, because ultimately the purpose of schools is to educate kids. And some kids are going to be a lot more challenging to educate than others. And, all I can say is your people do a world of good work. If you're a school board member, the notion that we may be looking at $1 million hit to local taxation, that's a pretty sobering concept. And something that both Jack Breyer and I in this district and several other districts have been working on is to come up with a means of mitigating that huge, huge impact on taxpayers. And in that regard, Laura Sibilia, my favorite independent legislator from up in what we refer to as the Wilmington Westover Valley, has introduced a piece of legislation which is referred to as H57 because she's H54 because she's a House member. And what that legislation would do would be to change the weightings on students in a manner that would be much more favorable to the Windham Northeast District, the Windham Southeast District, which of course is Athens, not Athens and Grafton, but rather Guilford, Putney, Dummerston, and Brattleboro. And the talking got going because Burlington School Board realized that they were going to take a tremendous hit unless something happened here. So I think we need to have two things clearly in mind. One is the fact that this is a high needs district, and for all of the good intentions of Act 173, it represents a fundamental shift in the way the state of Vermont has paid for special education in the past. And their solution to cost containment is to take it out of state budget and return the burden directly to the local budgets, which in many cases are ill prepared to shoulder the additional tax burden. So I'm going to ask you if you have any additional summary, Andy, and then I'm going to recognize Jack, because Jack has been very much involved in these discussions about how we mitigate cost to taxpayers by uh, encouraging the legislature to seriously consider H54, which is the Sibilia bill, which would save us, save our taxpayers an awful lot of money. So go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, no, thank you, David. And you are 100% correct in that assessment. And I think, you know, in talking with my colleagues and with the Vermont Council of Special Education Administrators, and I'm on the legislative committee with them, this is a huge topic for us. The difficult part is 50% of the state is going to benefit from this greatly, and 50% is going to take this huge hit. And so within our own organization, we're trying to navigate this and you know, deal with it, because, you know, obviously those who are benefiting it don't want to fight it, and they don't want us to change. And those of us who are taking the hit are trying to do exactly what you're talking about, right? Like, how do we find a happy medium somewhere?
And I have to comment on that. The districts that benefit are districts like Stowe, which have very low IEP counts to begin with. And what this amounts
Correct.
to for a town like Stowe is your taxpayers just got a tax reduction, because you can use what hitherto was IEP money, and you can roll it into other aspects of your programming that were never intended to be funded with IEP money. Okay, and with that comment, Mr. Breyer, would you like to comment here?
Yeah, if I might. There are a lot of so-called census-based systems, but none of them across the 50 states, but none of them are serious about it. Massachusetts technically has a census-based system, but it also has provision to cover high-spending students. It has provision for small districts. It has a provision that waits for free and reduced lunch. It effectively is back to what we have, except it's just not a fee-for-service system, and it works reasonably well. The only two states that really have a pure census-based system are Arkansas and Alabama. That should tell you a lot. Even Utah changed the formula. A few years ago, both California and Pennsylvania experimented with pure census-based systems. In both cases, the results were a tremendous shift to poor districts. It actually increased costs rather than lowered them, because districts that had been vigilant about cost containment now had free money if they were wealthy, and they spent it. So what ended up happening was the poor districts still spent their money. The wealthy districts spent more money. There was no savings. And then the states tried to cap the dollar amount, which is what this was really all about anyway. But in effect, both Alabama and Arkansas have fought off lawsuits saying that effectively by going to a census-based system, they don't have special ed. And technically they're right. They're not funding special ed. They're funding education, and it's just another per diem amount of money to individual districts. There is no provision for special ed in that circumstance. And it seems like a pretty straightforward violation of Brigham, and is arguably a violation of federal law. But be that as it may, I can't imagine how this thing got passed. I did notice that the original advisory committee had not a single school board chair or even school board district on it. It had members of it had two private school advocacy entities, but it didn't have what you'd expect it to have. And I think that, to be perfectly honest with you, Lauren Sebelia's bill is far from ideal, but it's not but at least it starts the reform process. And without it, this is a bill that punishes poor districts, and it is a direct financial transfer from communities that can't pay to communities that don't have to worry about it.
Thank you, Jack. Are there questions from the board? Is there additional comment from administration?
I'd just like to thank Andy for crunching all those numbers together. You know, trying to weed through a document as long as that is no easy task. And trying to put it into terms where people can start to grasp what it means for the SU. Like I said, those bottom line numbers, the 900,000 to $1 million, that's, if this goes through, this is something we're going to have to pick up in local budgets if we want to continue to educate these kids. It's very unfortunate because it's a huge hit.
I could also say one thing about this is it's tremendously destabilizing, particularly to small districts. I'm a little disappointed that we don't have more small districts on our ad hoc committee to fight this, because unfortunately they're the ones that are going to be disproportionately penalized. If you're part of a large district, Burlington, Rutland, a couple of students with high needs, you know, you can amortize that across a large population. But when you're in small districts, like an Athens Grafton district, or even an Athens Grafton Westminster or Rockingham district, you don't have the population. A single family with a couple of high need children coming into your district can actually throw your budget independently all by itself. And this makes that situation vastly worse. Essentially, it's sort of a way of putting a red letter on parents with kids with severe special needs, because who's going to want them to move into their neighborhood? That's why we have special ed funding at the state level, so that we don't put families into that kind of situation. We don't put communities into that kind of situation. It's morally wrong, and we need to fight it on that basis if we fought it for no other reason.
Thank you, Jack.
Jack, that was very well said, Jack. I could not have, thank you for advocating that way. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to be revisiting Act 173 again in the near future. I think we've certainly got out most of the points. We are now down to 8B and C, and we flipped those. Those are both executive session items, and we will, after we do director's comments, entertain a motion to go into executive session, and we will see if we can get this meeting over by a reasonable hour. Okay, director's comments. I'm going to actually ask you, Cheryl, if you would like to start us off tonight.
Well, thank you. Good to see everybody. Good to be back here. I'm trying to make sense of all of this and be of support to our administration, our teachers, all the people who work so hard to help the students and families in this community. I'd like to raise a couple of issues looking ahead. In addition to all of those around 173, I'd like some consideration of what I've read about also. I'm not expert in this, but an article by Chloe Leary in the Reformer is talking about another effort at the state level that would move all of early childhood out of the Family and Human Services area. That's not the proper title of that agency, but you get the idea, over to the Agency of Education. And, you know, what she wrote about and her column, one who's a specialist in early childhood, really raises a lot of red flags about concerns that the very specialized expertise in early childhood isn't all there in the Agency of Education. And she spoke to how this integrated approach has been helpful. So I just raised that. I think this was mentioned to us in the last year or so. This looks like it's moving along again. And I think it will end up, actually could potentially have an impact on what we're talking about in terms of special ed as well. So I'd like to have us learn a little bit more about what that risk factor might be, having to do with the potential blending or moving of early childhood entirely over into the Agency of Ed. And then I'd like to raise some things that have to do with curriculum content areas. I'd like to, at a board meeting coming up, I'd like to learn a little bit more in more detail what's going on from a curricular point of view, and that includes children who may be doing better than proficient at the grade level. We've worried a lot about those who are not doing well. I'm well aware that we also have students whose needs we're not serving, and that may show up even more when kids get back into school, that some will have been doing better during these COVID times away from the school environment than one might have thought, and what will happen if they get back into the school setting and they're so much more proficient than their classmates that they're not going to do as well, and then maybe more social emotional problems that come. So my comments are a little varied right now, but I think I'm looking ahead to topics that we as a board could address with staff and community help going forward. Thanks, David.
Cheryl, can I have those in email as well, please? I did write a note here, but
sure, I'll be happy to do that
in writing. Deb Wright, are you with us still? Would you like to comment now? Okay, I'll come back to Deb. Molly Bannock. All set?
I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Molly. George Smith.
All set. Thank you.
Priscilla. Okay, I'll come back to Priscilla. Lynn Morgan.
I just wanted to thank everybody that had reports today, from the auditors to Chris and to Andy. It's really helped a lot to start understanding what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Jason Terry.
Hi, David. Thank you. Just like to say that if the state government's plan is to push families and businesses out through taxation, they're doing a good job. Thank you.
Thank you. Jack Breyer.
Yeah. Hey, I think I owe people an apology tonight. The email that went out today said WNESD Board Act 173 summary for a meeting that the WNESD board was going to have, and I just talked to you, Chris, saying we were going to cancel that WNESD board meeting. And when I went online tonight to just as a check, because one of my colleagues said, it looks like we have a board meeting tonight. I looked, and indeed it said there was a WNESD board meeting, and there was the call-in data for it. So I sent around saying, no, there's not. Well, of course, that's what happens when spell check goes on the fritz, and I'm a little worried that our colleague just read some, but maybe not all of the email traffic tonight. And had I not logged on just to make sure that nobody was coming to the WNUESD meeting, did I realize, of course, we had the SU meeting tonight. So my embarrassed apologies to one and all. Although, you know, one less meeting would have been the worst thing in the world. Have a good one.
Thank you, Jack. Priscilla, do you have any director's comment tonight?
Yes, with the president and the governor both pushing for full-time instruction, it'll be challenging for all of our teachers and our, in particular, because although the COVID-19 vaccines are rolling out, and listening to it, would expect that 75 and above group to be finished very, very soon, much sooner than what they were projecting in the beginning if we get those additional vaccines, and then the 70. So hopefully even our teachers will be at that point. I know Vermont does not put teachers before others on the time scale, and neither does Massachusetts, although when I looked at New Hampshire, they were listed there as the next group and able to sign up at this point, although theirs are really projected much further out in assigning their dates for providing that vaccine than what we are in Vermont or in Massachusetts, as I understand. So keep that in mind, and keep in mind that our teachers are nervous about that. But the documentation has been that it is not as much in schools. And the younger they are, the less severe the cases are, although we're looking at problems with more severe cases at UVM and at Dartmouth that were noted today. Also, keep in mind that if anyone in the audience needs information from the business office or any of those areas, the Vermont Freedom of Information Law, which is the same, it corresponds with the Vermont, with the federal Vermont Federal Freedom of Information Act, allows any person to ask a question or to get information as needed. So being sure that it's good that the board asks those questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Priscilla. I just want to comment, not so much for this board, because we know what we're working with, but for anyone else who may be tuned in here, if you ever wonder what Chris Pratt's leadership means for the WNESU, we got two pretty good examples here tonight in the persons of both Flora Pagan and Andy Haas. These guys are absolutely major league, and I'm not entirely certain that we would have their services if Chris wasn't such a good talent spotter and nurturer and delegator to that talent that we have. So thanks to all three of you for the contributions that you make here. I would like to entertain a motion now to enter into executive session for an item 8A, which is a building lease, and also an item 8C, which is superintendent evaluation. That's an update. That's not the evaluation itself. Chris.
I'd like to add Lynn to that list in regards to, key players to the SU office.
Oh, thank you, Chris. You are so right. You are so right. Lynn,
I was about to do that too. Thank you.
we so often take you for granted, and we're aware of the huge amount of work you do. Okay, a motion, please. George has a motion. Do I have a second? I have a second from Molly. I will roll call it here. Deb Wright.
Aye.
Thank you. Lynn.
Aye.
Jack Breyer.
Aye.
George Smith.
Aye.
Priscilla Lambert.
Aye.
Jason Terry.
Aye.
Molly Bannock.
Aye.
Okay, we're in.